And joining us on the show now is former National Security Advisor to the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Thank you very much, Mr. Bolton, for speaking to us. The first question is naturally about how long do you think at this point this war is going to last? It was initially reported that this would be a quick in and out decapitation operation. Now we're in day 4.
Well, the story changes quite a bit. That's a problem for Trump because he has not really carefully defined what his objectives are. And of course, achieving the objectives determines how long the operation has to continue. What he started off by saying was that it would be a regime change operation, which implies a fairly significant campaign to help destroy the instruments of state power that threaten the United States and its friends and allies in the Middle East. And it begins to convince people at the top of the regime that their days are numbered unless they go over to the opposition. Trump has changed his mind on this, and his subordinates are all over the place in terms of what they say the objectives are. One thing we can be certain of is that regime change is Israel's number one objective. And we're obviously working closely with Israel, so that's what they're going to be after. Trump has said in the past 24 hours he thinks it might be 4 or 5 weeks, but he's prepared to go longer. And he's also prepared, if need be, to put boots on the ground. We probably have some there on the ground already, but in more substantial quantities. So Trump has a political problem in the United States, to be sure, and explaining and justifying why he's doing this. But in terms of the operation itself, I think 4 to 5 weeks is a minimum. I think this could take months.
What do you think is the objective of this operation? Because we've heard of regime change. We heard of how this was a preemptive strike. We've heard of how Iran was planning to assassinate President Donald Trump. And we've also heard of how they wanted to wipe out any capability that Iran has to develop nukes. So what really is the end goal of this operation?
Well, I still think it's inconclusive. It certainly is the case, by the way, that Iran has tried to assassinate Donald Trump. They've tried to assassinate me, too, because of the successful strike against Qasem Soleimani, then the head of the Quds Force in January of 2020 in Trump's first term. I don't think that's his main motivational factor. I think what Trump wants to do is eliminate Iran's nuclear weapons program, and destroy its ballistic missile program and hopefully eliminate its support for terrorism. My logic may be different from Trump's because I think the only way you can achieve those objectives, which I think are legitimate, is to eliminate the regime. He may be prepared to stop short of that. He has said again within the past 24 hours that he looks at Venezuela as a template. That, in other words, you take out the top leader or a few and then deal with who's left. I think that's a mistake in Venezuela, but in any event, Iran is not Venezuela. The state, the rule of the Ayatollahs is much, much deeper than simply the supreme leader. To have a real regime change, you've got to go very deep into that leadership cadre and eliminate the Revolutionary Guard, which is why a campaign to achieve those objectives will take some extended period, I think.
But if only to remove the top leadership was the objective, that has already been achieved. The Ayatollah is dead. 6 of his lieutenants are dead. In fact, America has said 40 top leaders were killed in the first 1 minute of the operation. Then why are we still continuing 4 days later?
Because you can replace Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei with unknown Ayatollah 500 or unknown Ayatollah 501 or unknown Ayatollah 502. The ideology is still the same. That's why it has to be the entire regime that's overthrown. And I include the Revolutionary Guard, who in many sense are the real government. They control the nuclear and ballistic missile programs. They control 40% of the economy. And they are the real power to be reckoned with.
Do you think that is possible at all? Because the initial appeal was to the people of Iran saying that we wiped out the leadership. Now you need to seize your destiny. You need to take things into your hands. But from what we've seen in Iran in the last 4 days, there hasn't been some spontaneous, significant outburst or people on the streets.
That's true. And in part because Trump told them to stay indoors, which is very good advice so they don't get hit by debris and falling from the sky and missiles that may miss their targets. I think that we saw what the regime of the Ayatollahs did back in January when it killed, Trump said in the State of the Union message, 32,000 protesters. And that was after Trump had told the opposition, keep protesting, take control of your institutions, help is on its way. Well, help didn't come. It's there now, but one can understand why the people
has it come too late? Have people already lost the incentive? Have they lost the will?
I don't think so. You know, it's very interesting in the customs of their faith as they buried many of the people who were killed during these demonstrations weeks after their death. There were reports in many places from around Iran that the family and friends, the mourners, were shouting "Death to the Ayatollahs." And just last week, when universities opened their new term, there were 4 days of demonstrations by the students against the regime. I think it's accurate to say that among the Iranian people, the regime has never been more unpopular since it took power in 1979. So in that sense, this really is an opportune moment to strike.
But after Operation Epic Fury, we've had about 1,000 Iranians get killed in the last 4 days, including close to 200 young girls. Wouldn't that have gone a long way to try and destroy any goodwill that America could have got?
Well, I'm not at all clear about the attack on the school. It could have been an Iranian missile that went wrong, and it's a tragedy if any civilians are killed. I think what the Iranian people took away from the 12-day war last year when the U.S. and Israel attacked the nuclear and ballistic missile programs was that we did our best and a very good job to be precise in the targeting. And their conclusion was important, that they saw that the regime could not protect its most important assets, the nuclear and ballistic missile programs. And they drew from that the lesson that if the regime couldn't protect those assets, it couldn't protect itself. And if it can't protect itself, and we've just seen the demise of the supreme leader, then its days are numbered. And I think that's what they're thinking through now. But we need the opposition. We need better coordination with the opposition because, as you say, they have to take the risks on the ground. And we need to know more about what they think of the circumstances.
Who is the opposition which can replace the Revolutionary Guard and the Ayatollah? Because I heard Mr. Trump say that we had selected a few people, but they were also killed in our initial strike. So who are the replacements?
Well, none of the people who were killed would have been adequate replacements anyway. They're part of the machine, and they would behave just like Delcy Rodriguez is going to behave in Venezuela. They're hoping to outlast Trump in Caracas, and the regime is hoping to outlast him in Tehran. The opposition is very widespread in Iran, but frankly, it's not very well organized. So I think the most likely outcome of a successful regime change in the near term would be a military government by the conventional armed forces, not the Revolutionary Guard, but the regular military. And hopefully by generals who understand their job is after the Ayatollahs, is to allow the Iranian people through their own consultative process to begin to devise the government they want going into the future and then cede power to that government when elections have taken place. It's going to be tumultuous and it could be bloody. The Ayatollahs have ruled with an iron fist for 47 years. They're not going to give up easily.
But if the Ayatollah and the Revolutionary Guard were to be replaced by a military government, will that be any more democratic a process, any more democratic a solution, anything more people-friendly than what people of Iran have seen so far? What's the guarantee?
Well, I think in the near term, certainly it would not be democratic, but hopefully it won't be run by a group of religious fanatics with authoritarian instincts. It would be run looking for an analogy. This is not the perfect analogy, but like General Jaruzelski in Poland, who realized at the end of the communist rule that his job was really to facilitate a peaceful transfer of power to Lech Walesa and the Solidarity trade union, which he was able to do. It may be difficult whenever there have been military coups in countries. It's often difficult to hand back over to civilian authorities. And this would obviously be a new government because the Islamic Republic of Iran would be gone. But I think that's the most likely way. The regular military can establish order after what could be a very tumultuous period. And then as conditions settle, allow for the unfolding of a constitutional process.
And do you still think that the people of Iran eventually are going to be out on the streets once all this initial bombing is over?
Yes, I think the opposition to the regime comes from many different reasons. Economic reasons. The Iranian economy is in terrible shape. They're actually running out of water around the country. The young people, who comprise 2/3 of the population under 30, know they could have a different life. They can see it on the internet when it works. They can see it across the Gulf. The women are entirely dissatisfied with the rule of the Ayatollahs. They proved that almost 3 years ago after the murder of the young Kurdish woman, Mahsa Amini, for defying the dress code. The ethnic groups are very restive, and there's a lot of tension there. So you put all that together, really, the regime's in internal affairs is in very desperate shape.
All right, so there's still discontent against the regime, and boosted by the help or the operations of Israel and America. Eventually, people will seize this moment in destiny. But what about the larger region? You know, now you've got the other Gulf countries also being attacked by Iran in retaliation. Will it become much worse with the entire region going up in flames before it becomes even a slightly better?
Well, I don't think it's going to go up in flames. I think we are systematically eliminating much of Iran's capability to retaliate against the Gulf states, against Israel, against our deployed forces. The Iranian Navy has been decimated, which means it'll be very hard to close the Strait of Hormuz. We're systematically trying to destroy their missile arsenals and production facilities. They certainly still have the terrorist weapon that indeed is problematic, and you can see Hezbollah in Lebanon attacking Israel across the blue line there already. So, but the main thing is to continue and show in a systematic way that we are dismantling the regime structures and the structure of what the full name of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Guard Corps for the revolution itself, that is being taken apart. That is what will tell people inside Iran that the regime's days are limited, and that the opportunity is there if they're prepared to take it, to overthrow it.
But before that happens, will it devolve into a full-fledged war with all the other Gulf countries also getting involved, and the Hezbollah?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think if the Iranians continue to attack the Gulf Arab states over the next few days, I think they will retaliate. It's an incredibly foolish move to do what Iran has done and attack civilian targets in places like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait. It's just going to bring those states into war against them. It won't end up to Iran's benefit, that's for sure.
All right. Finally, in your estimate, I know it's very difficult to answer this question, but in your estimate, what's the longest that this conflict could carry on?
Well, Trump has said 4 to 5 weeks. I think it will be longer than that. But ultimately, it comes down to what his objective really is. You can't estimate a length until you.
If we think of regime change as the ultimate goal, how much longer could this go on? And how much longer could Iran hold out?
Sure, I think it could go on for several months. I don't think this is a short-term proposition. This regime has been in power 47 years, and there are many dead-enders who are not going to give up quickly.
You think that Iran has the capacity to hold out for several months? Their missile launchers are being destroyed. America has said that most of their capabilities, military capabilities, their military leaders, they do not have a leadership right now. Despite that, they can carry on for at least a year.
Well, I doubt it. I think the collapse will come before then. But I think when you set a time, it becomes a deadline. And I think that's a mistake. We learned from the war in Afghanistan, where the Taliban said to the Americans, you have the watches, we have the time. And I think this time we should hold the time in our hands.
Finally, do you think this could end with a deal with, again, all countries going back to the talks table? Is that even possible?
Well, Trump will talk to anybody, anytime about anything. That's what he does. So I can't rule that out. I think it would be a mistake. I think we've got nothing to say to this regime except what country would you like to go to for your exile?
All right, Mr. John Bolton, thank you very much for joining us.